printing. Hi, I'm Eric. I'm from the School of Pharmacy. And before I start, I just have a couple of questions I want to ask for context. So show of hands, who's using the starter kit? Okay, and who's using other Drupal something? Okay, who's using both? And who's using the starter kit but you've done things that the starter kit wasn't intended to do? Wonderful. Okay, thank you. That was really just for me. So I want to talk about this idea that we've been kicking around about Drupal initiatives at UCSF. And I'm sure everyone's heard this metaphor before here, probably many, many, many times. So if you don't know, these are the silos. And a lot of times this really is what collaboration looks like at UCSF. Somebody takes a little grain from one silo and a little grain from another silo, and ooh, we work together. But I grew up in the 80s, at least I think I did. And I sometimes think of something else when we think of silos. So if you don't know, these are ballistic missile silos. And this also is, in a kind of tragic way, sometimes a metaphor for communication at UCSF, because it's a tremendous amount of fuel and power and energy that could be released, but for the most part, hopefully, they just sit there in these silos. And what we want to do is not just sit in these silos. So this at DrupalCon, between actually we never saw the mountain. We saw the first day.
I saw it when, yeah.
Did not see much mountain, but we saw a few beers. And one of the things that became really, really obvious to everyone that was there was, wow, we are exchanging so much information. We actually ended up doing like this weird 2-hour like site demo when we could have all been having free time. And talked a lot about ways that we could move the use of Drupal forward at UCSF, do things with Drupal really along the lines of the way Drupal works, which is sharing code, sharing functionality, and building together. How we could do that at UCSF, where we're so traditionally like, I work on my thing, you work on your thing. Yeah. So to me, this comes down to a tale of two projects. And the fourth chapter, which is what happens when we move on from working with chapter 3. Now, so those of you that don't know, Pharmacy started our project with chapter 3 before the starter kit really launched and started moving forward. And we basically were both working with chapter 3 at the same time, and in some cases solving some of the same problems. But we made a really crucial mistake, I think, and that was assuming that because the end product looked so different, that we really didn't have much common ground and didn't need to build these together. We could go our way, and the starter kit would go its way, and we would hang out later. Well, as we've found now, it's really like not the case. So I thought this was going to be one of those really great presentations with funny pictures the whole way, and then I got to about here and gave up. So, in talking to people at DrupalCon, especially talking to Courtney about different features that they wanted in the starter kit, either they wanted and didn't come out the way they wanted, or that they wanted in phase 2, and there's not a plan to build those yet, I'd be like, oh, well, we have that. It's not built to necessarily work, with the starter kit the way it is today, but we've been building some of that stuff. So why should everybody that wants to use the starter kit have to like scrape up a bunch of money to like run a phase 2 through, and basically pay chapter 3 to build the same things over again. So let me back up. So the idea was Drupal initiatives. We will sit down and we will just hammer out a way to collaborate on some of these things that makes sense, that doesn't have too much overhead, and that can actually turn out something that's not perfect, but something that can be used and then can be built on. And that was to me, I didn't say this earlier, to me that was the biggest thing that came out of DrupalCon this year, was actually come up with ways to work with other people here. So I kind of conceptualized like one idea, and this is just my kind of a mental framework for how this could play out. And this is basically ask yourself, do I have colleagues, look around the table here now, or other people you know that are using Drupal, regardless of skill level. We'll talk about that in a minute, but do you have shared problems? Chances are you do. Okay? Are the approaches people taking to solve those problems, are they inconsistent? And generally they are. But you may have compatible solutions. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when I talk about one initiative we've already started where we thought it was too different, and when we sat down it was actually really easy to pick it apart. So just because you have different end goals doesn't mean that part of the solution isn't compatible and something you could build on. What you do need is complementary abilities. Not everybody needs to be the programmer, but you do need a mix of abilities, and it needs to round out to a team that can actually get something done. So depending on what you're doing, you might need a themer, you might need somebody that just really knows how to move content types around in the interface, or somebody that's great at coming up with information architecture. You might need a developer or somebody that knows certain modules. So you don't need everybody to know all the same things, but you need a complement of abilities. And you need the will to succeed. You've got to have the will to just do it, because it's really easy when you look at these things to say, it's too hard, we'll come back to it later, which is kind of what we did for maybe 6 months with people, and we could have really tackled it earlier. So the benefits of doing this are that you're going to have more consistency across the board. That means that your site works the way my site works the way another site works, and John knows what's going on when we all call him up because we broke it. Okay, you also get better quality. Just having another pair of eyes on what you're doing when you're working on something is going to raise the quality. And the nature of trying to do something like this requires that for at least part of the time, you get out of your cube or your office and you sit down with somebody else and look at it with 2 pairs of eyes or 3 pairs of eyes. It's got modularization ability, which is meaning, you guys know what that means. So,
is that a word? I don't think
yes,
it's a word.
You just made it up.
It is now.
Point here.
And really all I'm saying is it's not just modular, but it's in doing this, you're taking pieces that you can share, and then when someone wants to build onto it later, it's also extensible. Maintenance is a maintenance benefit because the modules and the pieces of whatever you build that are shared among other people are going to be maintained either by that group or centrally, depending on how it's taken on. I'm giving a lot of extra work to John while we're doing this. But ultimately, that's still, it goes back to the consistency and quality. It's in everybody's benefit. You look at camaraderie, working on something, you'll have an actual accomplishment. And your boss will love it eventually, although you may have a hard time convincing them why you need to work with, dentistry or whoever it is at the time. And ultimately, it's the Drupal way. It just fits in with the way Drupal's built, so it makes a lot of sense.